Welcome on to the next of our 2019 Bonitas Comrades Marathon online success seminars. I'm Brad Brown. We've got the Comrades coach with us once again, Parry. Lindsay, welcome.
How's it, Brad? How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I'm chuffed to have you on, and someone else who's going to be on today as well is Nicki de Villiers, a sports nutritionist. We'll bring Nicki in just a moment. And the reason we're bringing Nicki on today is because we're going to be talking lots about nutrition when it comes to Comrades and the build-up to and also on race day. We didn't want to save this till the last webinar. We wanted to get it on now so that you can practice your nutrition strategy and what you need to do in the build-up to Comrades 2019. Just to let you know what we're going to be running through in this seminar, we're going to focus on exactly where you should be right now, what you should focus on in April, if you're running 2 oceans, how you can structure things from a training perspective and what you need to look out for. And then we're also going to be practicing and talking about practicing race day routines. And then the most important bit of this online seminar is your nutrition. Fueling for Comrades success in 2019, what to do in the build up to and on race day. And then we're also going to share some Comrades Marathon resources with you as well. We love hearing from you. So if you are hopping on this video, let us know where you're joining us from. I think every time we do one of these live webinars, the butterflies in the stomach start flying in formation, and we want to know, first of all, where you're joining us from, what part of the world, how many Comrades you've done, if you're a novice or if it's your first up run, or if you're an old hat at this and been around the block a few times, let us know in the comments below as well. And we're also going to be making this presentation, the slide deck, available for you to download. So if you want a copy of the slide deck, particularly the stuff that Nicki's going to be talking about, there's going to be some cool charts and that sort of thing. Make sure you let us know in the comments below as well. And if you are joining us, we'd love for you to be able to share this with your running mates, your club mates. If you've got a club training group on WhatsApp, or if you've got a Facebook group, please share this link. Just copy the link and share it into those groups. Obviously, the more people we can reach in the build-up to Comrades, the better chance we've got of helping them have a successful race in 2019. Lindsay, this is crunch time. As we're heading into April and May, what's come before is important, but these are the 2 months that make a big difference in Comrades training.
Absolutely. We've covered it enough times now to say that January and February is supposed to be about creating the habit. Getting yourself into a routine, building the discipline, building the consistency, but that you actually don't want to get too carried away with the training. But as we moved into March, and especially now as we're moving into April, we are hitting our peak Comrades months, and so now we are really preparing specifically for Comrades. We've distracted ourselves by either training for a PB on a shorter run, or for most people with qualifying. But this is it. Now everything we're doing really is all about Comrades.
Yeah, and I don't want to play it down, but the previous couple of months, what's gone is gone. There's no playing catch up now. It's these 2 months that matter, and it's what you do with these 2 months that's going to really dictate whether you succeed or fail on Comrades Race Day. Before we get into where you should be right now, keep those comments coming. We love hearing from you. Thanks for all the shares so far as well, the likes and the loves and that sort of thing. If you haven't yet and you've just joined us, welcome. Please keep those coming. We want to get as many people on this video as we can. Just also, before we get into where you should be right now, a big thank you to Bonitas for sponsoring this webinar and making it possible. So thank you very much to the team at Bonitas as well. And they're going to be doing some cool things in the build-up to Comrades as well as at the Expo and on race day too. Lindsay, let's talk about where we should be right now. And we normally break it down by medal, and I think that's probably a good way to do it. Let's start with, I don't want to say the back of the packers, but the vast majority of the field, the guys who are aiming at that sub-12, the 11 to 12, the Vic Clapham.
Yeah, these guys are the ones I refer to almost as your steady eddies, and the training should actually be the same. So there's not going to be an enormous increase over this period in time, but up until now, I would say they would have been absolutely fine around about the 40 to 50K mark, and now we're pushing that up to between 50 and say 65 kilometers per week for your back of the packers, and they'll obviously have the occasional run or week that'll be longer, because there will be a training marathon and there will be a training ultra marathon. So there will be weeks that'll probably go into the 80s and maybe almost scratch 90, but that's not going to be the norm. That's going to be those every 3 to 4 weeks we'll do a nice big week. For the rest, you're looking at between 50 and 65 kilometers per week.
Okay, the bronze medal guys and girls?
If we move into the bronze medal, Alex, you're looking more towards the 60 to 75, scratching 80 Ks a week. And then there'll be that occasional big week again where they are also going to do a marathon. And so there may be 1 or 2 weeks in this period that might get to 100 Ks a week. But I'd say anything starting to approach 90 Ks consistently is probably a bit much. So I'd aim to cap it around the 75, 80 kilometers.
The new medal, the sub-10s?
The new medal of the sub-10s is really not actually a whole lot more. So your Robert Machali guys should be probably a little bit more consistently into the 80s instead of capping it at the 80s. And then they may have the odd week that's nearly 100 kilometers, but as a consistent base, I'd say they're aiming for between 75 and 90 kilometers a week.
And then the sub-9ers, the Bull Rowans?
The Bull Rowan guys are starting to get into that kind of medal where I sometimes feel like even the people who aren't quite capable of a Bull Rowan, I feel like Comrades is the kind of race where you can do it if you train yourself into it. So we start to get a bit of a broad range here for me. And I think if you're a solid sub 330 marathoner, so you comfortably around about the 325 range, then I think you are happily going to be running around 90 Ks a week, and that's what you should be aiming for in your consistent runs. And then perhaps two weeks where you do your big mileage, that'll be between 100 and 110. And then if you are slower than 3.5, you're around about the 340 marks. If you're a 340 type of runner, and you prepare to compromise a little bit on the intensity, then you are looking at around about 100 kilometers a week, and maybe 110 to 115 as your 2 weeks out. But your big weeks, I wouldn't make them much bigger. But your kind of stock week will be just that little bit more. But you've got to be reasonable about it, and you can't do it for the sake of doing it. I mean, if you get injured, then you've got no chance of getting a Bull Run. So you're trying to do a little bit more, but you're backing off when you need to.
Yep. And then the Racing Snakes, the guys going for silver?
So the silver oaks is a huge range, really, and I think for the most part we talk to borderline silver guys, and I think for the borderline silver guys we're talking around about 120 Ks a week as the standard sort of week, and then perhaps 1 or 2 poking up at the 140K mark. And as we move closer to the guys trying to run under 7 hours, then we'll push that up, and your stock weeks become 140 to 160 Ks a week. This also tends to be a group of runners that have done a hell of a lot more running in their life. So they also do have a lot more experience in knowing how much you shouldn't be doing. But yeah, I'd say your minimum is 100 Ks a week, and your optimum is probably around 120 Ks a week, and then there'll be a couple of guys that do a bit more.
Lindsay, April, you mentioned how vital April and May is in Comrades, and April's a big one because a lot of people are doing sort of ultra marathons and doing really long runs. What do we need to be focusing on now? I'm guessing first we've got to stay consistent. I mean, we've spoken about that pretty much in every single seminar that we've done up to now, and then also I'm guessing staying injury free, that if something does pop up, make sure you get it sorted as soon as possible. What else? I mean, what are some of the other things we really need to keep an eye on in April?
So April is essentially the silly season. I mean, there's loads of marathons and loads of ultras to choose from. So you could quite easily, if you didn't know better, run 48 Ks on the 6th of April, 56 Ks. A week after that, you could run 50 Ks at Loscorp on the 13th of April, and on the 20th of April, you could run 2 Oceans. Okay, so the thing about April is there's lots of opportunities to run marathons and ultras, and we want to use them, but we don't need to use all of them. So the 3 week rule becomes really important here, and I'll include up to the first week of May into that equation. So between now being the kind of end of March and the end of the first week of May, the 5th, 6th, 7th of May, around there, you want to do probably a marathon and an ultra for the majority of the field, and then perhaps the silver guys will be doing 2 to 3 marathons and an ultra, or two marathons and 2 ultras. But really what we want to do is space those out, and especially for the majority of the field that need to squeeze 2 in there, it's important their timing. They must be at least 3 weeks apart, otherwise we are going to overdo it. And they present absolutely golden opportunities to put into practice some of the things that Nicki's going to be discussing today, but also everything else around race day, especially the pacing. So that is something that people don't practice much, because the majority of the field train much harder than they race on race day. So in this period, those 40 and 50K training runs, really important that you also practice running at the pace you need to be running Comrades at.
Yeah, Lindsay, and you mentioned a very important word there as well, is the sort of it's a training run. Now's not the time to be trying, and it might happen because you're fitter than you've ever been in your life. Now's not the time to be chasing PBs. It's having the big picture in mind, and that's Comrades.
Yeah, look, I always tell people, if you really want to test your fitness, test it on a shorter distance. And in our previous talks, I've spoken about using half marathons. But now as we get into this very important time of training, I would say a park run or your club time trial are the ideal opportunities to test that. But you don't want to test it in a marathon, and you absolutely don't want to be testing it in your Comrades long run. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. And then they don't feel great after that long run, but everyone tells them, don't worry, it's normal to be tired now, that's what the taper is for. But actually the taper is for really freshening you up and for building your confidence. So you don't want to be starting your taper on the back foot. If you do the Comrades long run as it's intended to be done, at the pace of Comrades training, experimenting with everything that you're going to be doing on race day, then you'll actually feel quite good during the taper, and you get stronger and stronger as you get fresher, and that builds confidence. That's actually what we want during the taper.
Absolutely. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below. If you have just joined us as well, the slide deck is available, particularly the bit that's coming that Nicki's going to be running through from a nutrition point of view. Just let us know in the comments below as well, and we'll swing it to you on Messenger. All you need to do is let us know below. Lindsay, you mentioned the amount of races, and particularly I don't think this is an international problem. We've got people on this video from all over, but particularly in South Africa, you use the word silly season. I don't think there's a better way to sum that up. Everywhere you look, there's a marathon or an ultra marathon. And we're going to talk, we can't talk specifics for each one. It's just physically impossible. But the big one is obviously 2 Oceans. For everyone who is running 2 Oceans, what should they be looking out for? How should they structure things in April?
Yeah, so I think the important thing about 2 Oceans is that it falls a little bit awkwardly this year. And so if people are preparing for Oceans, and especially if they're following the programs that we've put together, then the week leading into Oceans, up until the Thursday, I'd keep following the program fairly normally. Some of the weekends, I think the Bill Rowan medal is one of those. The weekend before is still a really big run. So I would maybe make that run a bit easier. But then the week runs I'd keep pretty standard until Thursday. Maybe Thursday's run, do a little bit less, Friday rest, and then go into the race. And even though we're just doing that little bit less leading into Oceans, that's because Oceans is 56 Ks. Even when I tell you now how I feel you should run it, we're probably going to run it just that little bit too hard. So we need to compensate a little bit on the training load. But the idea of Oceans is then to treat it as your long training run. Okay. And so again, if we go back to 2 minutes ago, the idea then is to test Comrades race pace, not to see how well we can do at 2 Oceans. So that's really for me the crucial part of Oceans, and using it as training. And obviously, again, just dialing in the nutrition, what shoes you're going to run in. Another good thing is that you're going to be running in club kit. So that's going to be in your normal stuff, your underwear, females, bras, the suntan lotion you're going to use. Make sure you don't have a reaction to it. The Vaseline, the plasters, you name it. you're going to use all of it.
Yep.
Now, after 2 oceans, it's very important. If you behaved like that, you can carry on training as normal after the week after 2 oceans. However, you're not going to do a long club run on the 6th of May or on the 13th of May. What you can do is do another run of between 40 and 45 Ks. Now, people argue with me, what's the difference in 45 and 50 Ks? And the difference in the damage that those extra 40 to 45 minutes of running do for you is a lot. So if you're running oceans, then you're not going to do your club Comrades long run, and that's important. You're going to go much, much shorter than that. Okay? And the second point is that if you do run 2 oceans too hard, which a lot of people will do, then you need to rest the week afterwards. You must allow yourself to recover properly from 2 oceans. And then from there, you will follow the program. Normally, once again, you won't be doing a long run. You'll be doing a 40 to 45 Ks 4 weeks before Comrades race day. But that's really, as a South African, and lots of South Africans are going to do both races, that's how you're going to treat that, inserting that race in there.
Yeah, Lindsay, and you make an important point as well, that it's you can still run the club run, just be conservative, don't run the whole thing. It's again, just because something is there doesn't mean you have to do the whole thing. Use the club run because there's support, but if you're only going to be running 40 or 45 Ks from it, then organize that somebody picks you up at that point, or catch a taxi back, or whatever it is. But just because your club's running 60 Ks on that day doesn't mean you have to. If you go to a buffet, you don't eat everything. You eat what you like, and that's what you need to be. You need to be disciplined at this stage, and you'll be rewarded on Comrades Race Day. Lindsay, you also spoke about testing, and that's what we wanted to talk about. Even if you're not running oceans, maybe you're running Loscorp, or you're running the Arthur Creswell, the Bergville Ladysmith, whatever the ultra is you're running, or whatever marathons you're running, now's the time to be preparing for Comrades Race Day and using it as a dress rehearsal. And you mentioned some of the things you can do, and let's dig into that a bit more. And one of the things that we haven't spoken about is the run-walk strategy. This is a great time to test that out.
Yeah, and that really plays into the pacing and ensuring we get the pacing right. I mean, one of the best tools for ensuring that you do run slow enough, but it also then has the added advantage of changing the way that we contract our muscles, which is also very important on race day and the longer any race goes along. So we want to start, the saying for me is we want to walk early and often. So we don't want to keep running until we're tired, and then you have to walk, and then those walks get longer and longer. You want it to be very consistent, and you want to incorporate it as part of your overall race plan. So I do have some little rules of thumb that I tend to use as we go through the different medals. But the most important point that I want to make is that it needs to be a routine that sits well with you. You do feel in your mind, okay, I've done enough work, and it's not a rest, but let's just say we've earned a rest of sorts, but it shouldn't be seen as a rest. And I think that's part of the reason why people can't, for example, do a 3-minute run, 1-minute walk strategy. But for me, if you're a Comrades finisher, you should be walking every 6 minutes to 3 kilometers. So let's at least one walk break. Sorry, I said 6 kilometers. I meant 6 minutes to 3 kilometers. Oh, that's right. So at least every 20 minutes, you should be having a 1-minute walk break. If you're going for a bronze medal, it's every 3 to 5 Ks, let's say. And then for Robert Machali, 1-minute walk every 6 Ks or every second water point. Your Bill Rowan guys should be walking every 6 to 9 kilometers. Your silver medal guys should be walking 1 minute every 10 kilometers. And then on top of those walks, there should be some walking that happens on the hills. Again, I do split that up a little bit in terms of the medals. But if you're going for a finishers, I don't think you should be doing any more than any more running than 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, or pole to pole. So in other words, lots of walking on those hills. Your bronze guys, maybe 2 minutes running, 1 minute walk. Your Robert Machali, 3 minute run, 1 minute walk. And then Bill Rowan and Silver, you'll feel it a little bit. I like to walk for about a minute, a third of the way up the hill, and then walk for a minute, about 2/3 of the way up the hill. But you can do a little bit more or a little bit less. You've just got to feel it a bit, but it's important that you do some walking on every hill. And if we follow those two things, that we're getting this regular run walk plus on the hills, you're going to have fresh legs for very deep in the race. You're going to be able to run at a very consistent pace and still feel quite strong at the end of the race. But in terms of these 40Ks and ultras, they present the perfect opportunity to put this into place.
Absolutely. Lindsay, you also touched on the equipment, and we're going to talk about this closer to race day, about nothing new on race day. And these are the races you need to test the stuff that you're using. Like you said, your club gear, what underwear you're using, just the shoes. Are your shoes fine? The socks you're wearing. This is the time to try everything. You don't want to wake up a week before race day and realize, I haven't done a long run in these socks, for example, that I'm going to be wearing. Are there any tips that you can give people now from an equipment point of view to make sure that you're ready for Comrades race day?
Absolutely. And the most important tip is to make a list. Every time you use something that works, you need to write it down on that list. And then every time you do one of these long runs, you need to get that list out and make sure that you're using all of those things. And then when you go to Comrades, you take that list with you. So we start at our feet and we look at, okay, where do we blister? Do we get blister on toes? Have we put on Vaseline there? Have we put on plasters where we generally tend to blister? Socks. If I'm blistering regularly, then it's worth trying a different pair of socks. So let's go and have a look and see what socks are available. The next thing is your shoes. Keep checking them out regularly. Every time you do one of these long runs and you're going through your list, check if they've worn through the outsole, if the midsole's too crinkly and they're looking a bit squishy and flattish. Do I need a new pair of shoes? So you can purchase those timelessly. Then your underpants, socks, female sports bra is absolutely important. Your running kit. Then you want a Vaseline between your legs, between your bum cheeks, between your arms. Suntan lotion. Put that on everywhere that's going to have exposure to the sun. Your running cap that you're going to use. How are you going to carry all of your stuff? So do you have a special belt or as we used to call them in the 80s, a moon bag? Like what are you actually going to transport all the stuff around the course with you? And that's really important. Suntan. Sunglasses. Some oaks go and buy a brand new pair of sunglasses because you think, what could go wrong? And, often sunglasses can be quite tight around the side of the head, and that could lead to headaches. So absolutely everything that you've used successfully needs to go on that list, and then you need to make sure that you use that same stuff at the training runs and you use that same stuff at Comrades.
Absolutely. The other thing that you're going to test out is obviously your nutrition. So we're going to talk about that extensively now. And I'm going to bring Nicki de Villiers in on this one. Before we get Nicki in, let's just keep the flow of questions coming. There's some great ones coming through. And we're going to answer quite a few towards the end of this presentation as well. So pop them into the comments. Don't forget as well, if you would like a copy of the slide deck from this presentation, let us know below as well. And we'll swing those to you on Messenger as well. And we're going to get to some great. I see there's lots of great questions coming through. Let me welcome Nicki in. Nicki, it's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks.
I can't believe it's a year ago since we last had you on. It seems like yesterday that we had you on one of these Comrades ones, but time flies. Just a big thanks once again to Bonitas for making these webinars possible. Nicki, I'm going to leave the ball in your court. You've been doing an awesome presentation around the country at a couple of the road shows and the women's seminars that pretty much, I think, covers everything you need to know when it comes to nutrition and Comrades. So I'm going to let you run through that. I know it's going to take quite a few minutes, and that is probably going to answer a lot of the questions that have been asked, but there are some that I think we might be able to get to. There'll be lots of time for questions at the end as well, and we'll also answer questions in the comments. So keep those questions coming. If you haven't shared this with a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group that you are in with people you know that are running Comrades, please do. It really helps us get that message out. Nicki, I'm going to hand it over to you. The ball is in your court.
All right, thanks, Brad. Let me run through the basics of it. The very, very first, very important thing is the amount of food that we eat. We're running a lot more, so therefore we have to eat a lot more food. And make sure that we keep it as far as possible, not junky stuff. So we need to really build the attitude of predicting what we're going to do and eating for what we're going to do, rather than what we eat this reward stuff all the time when we're tired and when we're hungry. So referring to energy balance, make sure one of the ways in which you can measure it or maybe look at it is basically weight loss and weight gain through this period. That if your weight is nice and stable, we're happy to go. If you're gaining weight, obviously you're eating too much for what you're running. But my main concern is more on those that fall behind on eating whilst we're putting on these excessive runs or, long runs and so forth. So make very, very sure that you eat enough. There can be changes to appetite in this period, that you fall behind in terms of that you feel you don't have appetite. Those are all warning signs that you really need to up it and maybe force a little bit of the intake. So that's the very first, very important thing. The second thing in terms of where we get that energy from is basically still your normal food. And maybe this time, off your racing is that we really try to eat a variety of stuff. That is one of the very important things, and that we do include quality of food, because recovery depends on what quality you put on, not only the quantity. So if I talk about quality, eating whole grains, not relying on a lot of refined carbohydrates, but whole grain stuff, eating, good quality fruit and veg, make sure there's a variety in there, having it with every single meal that we eat, try and make every meal that you eat quite balanced, plan for it so that it's not smash and grab stuff on your way, because those are usually lacking in a bit of, the quality that we want. And make sure that we eat regular. So try to have something every 3 hours throughout the day so that we can control cravings to obviously maintain quality, and that we also then never overdo it with one single meal, that we don't get too hungry and then eat a huge supper, but that we rather make sure that most of the food that we eat is centered around our training. So before, during, and after that training, which brings me into that aspect that we really want to fuel every race that we do well. Remember that it's not about only fueling that race, it's also got a lot to do about recovery. So what I eat currently or what I eat today on the road, through my run, before my run, after my run, is determining how well I'm going to run tomorrow. I often find that people think it's going to be it's not a hard run that I'm going to have to do, or it's just a recovery run, but whatever we do in that run is influencing what we need to do tomorrow. So make sure that every run we do is fueled. With other words, eat something before you go into the run. That something is carbohydrate based as far as possible. Keep it the same, keep it consistent. And that carbohydrates would be any starchy thing, the cereal that you like, the bread that you like, if you eat potatoes or sweet potatoes or pastas or whatever you're on, any kind of fruit juice. So make sure that it works for you. Make sure in terms of your timing of that meal, that you understand when to eat the meal and how much of the meal. Remember, treat it as fuel. So we're working with liters of fuel going into the body for what we're going to do, not trying to afterwards compensate all the time. During the runs, try to fuel as well and get used to your race strategy. If it is eating something every 20 minutes, if it is every half an hour, but in terms of fluid as well as fuel sources, remember the fuel sources can be liquid, so it can be carbohydrate drinks, it can be gels, but it can also be solids. Try to work with stuff that's going to be on the road on the day of the marathon. Don't do weird stuff that people are going to have to carry around for you all around. Remember, there's three things to this. The one is we are actually training for performance. So you increase performance, or the performance is better if there's enough fuel on board. The second thing is you are training your gut. So you're training your body through the running, but we need to train the gut through the eating. And the gut is trainable, but you're going to have to put in the hard work, which often is a schlep, but just keep on doing it for, optimal intake on race day. And the other very important thing for this fueling during your training is immune system. So as soon as you run into an energy deficit, the one department in the body that really gets a huge budget cut is the immune system. And this is not the time where we want to go there. So therefore the fueling in during your runs is also then supporting that. The last thing in terms of recovery then is to try and recover early. So as soon as what it is comfortable after your run, try to eat or drink something. Remember in this order, please, the importance of the fueling is number 1, carbohydrate refuel, number 2, the hydration, and only at number 3 position comes the protein. So be aware that if you use any kind of supplement or product that you recover with, make sure there is carbohydrate in the thing and make sure carbohydrate is higher than the protein content thereof. Can be through a supplement, it can be through your normal food. A normal breakfast with your cereal and your milk or a nice bowl of oats with milk and peanut butter should do it fine. The last thing then just is remember that whatever you do here, is you're going to duplicate it on race day. So it must be practical. It must be towards the availability of stuff and really to close on race day your ears for new stuff or for spectacular new inventions or those kind of things. I mean, you've referred to it often that we're just not going to try new food on race day. And that is so, so important. So you're going to have to work with stuff that you can travel with and that you don't have to search for once you arrived at your destination.
Yeah, Nicki, if I can jump in here, often, I mean, we get lots of questions about nutrition at Comrades and particularly race day, but the truth of the matter is that's just one small part of it. And as much as you've got to get that right on race day in order to make sure you have a good race, a lot of this groundwork needs to get done weeks and months in advance, and that's why we're talking about it now. So race day, and you've got that nutrition menu, that food pyramid sort of thing that you've put up, and race day is just at the top. And you mentioned energy balance, daily nutrients, nutrient timing and hydration. Those all form part of the entire strategy, and if you're only focusing on race day and neglecting and ignoring the rest, you're setting yourself up for not just failure, but just overall poor health.
Yeah, Brad, I mean, 99% of the job with nutrition is during training. So we need to eat well to train well. We get better through training, not on race day as such. So the role in race day is not necessarily to increase performance with my nutrition, it's to try and avoid damage with what I can do on race day. So if you're not going to try it throughout your period of training, I would rather not change anything on that day and just do what you've always been doing. Don't then try to increase and eat 3 bananas because now all of a sudden I need to increase it, because that can end in disaster. So yeah, the groundwork is all now. Everything you do in terms of nutrition needs to be settled now, because this is where you get the advantage of it, not necessarily just on that race day. Race day is just a duplicate of what's going on.
Absolutely. Talk to me about the energy balance, because this time, especially when we're upping mileage, it's easy to feel like you're either eating too much or not eating enough because you think you want to try and lose a couple of extra Ks, but you've got to be really mindful of getting the balance right, that you're giving your body enough calories, able to do the training and the amount of training you need to do. What are some of the dangers when it comes to energy balance and what you need to look out for?
Okay, so as I said, my main concern throughout this period is creating negative energy balance. We're at a point where you probably should have lost the weight you wanted to lose through energy restriction. So any weight loss from here onwards would probably be because of training volume, not because I'm restricting food intake. So we're more worried about creating a negative energy balance. With other words, we're falling behind with eating, and that's got profound effects on your performance, definitely, hormonal levels, definitely, mood, irritability, depression, immune system, as I said. So those are the worries that we have. We are aware that most of them are, we're consistently tired during these volumes of training. But that would be one of the symptoms, definitely. The suboptimal recovery, and then this feeling of I'm training and I'm actually going backwards in performance. There's probably a lot of things that contribute to that, but one pertinent block there is recovery and nutrition's role in this. Positive energy balance, so if you've all of a sudden now are starting to pick up weight, then there is a problem because you're eating more, and I would then definitely look at that reward aspect of eating. Now we've run a hard one, so we can reward with food, and it's usually the problem is the not necessarily the quantity, but the quality of food. We find ourselves eating more food that we're not supposed to eat. So that would be in the positive energy balance. But I would really suggest that people through this stage stop thinking about dieting to lose extra weight to get to the Comrades.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the daily nutrients as well, Nicki, and you touched on supplements and supplementation. often we get trapped into this thing where we're going, you know what, we're taking supplements so we can pretty much eat what we like, but that's not actually the case. I mean, supplements are exactly that. They should be supplementing a healthy diet. Is there anything that we should be eating more of, or should we should be avoiding in our sort of day-to-day stuff to set us up for Comrades success?
Yeah, there's a few things in terms of specific micronutrients that becomes more and more important, and that in sport nutrition overall is important, especially in runners. So the one is iron sources, that we have to make sure that we eat enough iron from food, not necessarily from supplementation. So that would be to include red meat. If you're vegetarian, you don't include that. Be very careful of the type of vegetables you include. And please, those that doesn't eat meat or are vegetarian, make sure you include legumes in your diet and not only get protein from other sources. In fact, it's quite a good thing for all of us to include. So that would be the one. The calcium is the other one that's quite important. Most of us will get enough calcium through milk products, milk, yogurt, and cheese. But those of us that don't eat it must also be very careful with what they choose. It's not impossible to get it, but green leafy vegetables, variety of food, dark, green stuff, dark yellow stuff, dark of the red, the berries, and those kind of things. And the last one is vitamin D, which is nowadays quite a popular one, and it's often mentioned all over. Vitamin D is the one vitamin we get through when we're in the sun, through the formation in the skin. And we also often assume runners are in the sun, more than enough to get vitamin D. But we often do avoid the sun. So we run when it's not sunny, and we're either very early or very late in the afternoon. So vitamin D is basically just to give yourself some sun, on a daily basis. You don't have to sit there for 3 hours or such, but just be aware how often you get to the sun, and make sure there's about 15-20 minutes somewhere that you spend some time in the sun. In terms of supplementation, if you eat more because you need to eat more too for the expenditure, and you eat more of the stuff, and all of us a variety of good quality food, there's no supplementation necessary. We don't have to waste money on any of those things. Moving to the stuff that we shouldn't eat, it's all based in quality. As I mentioned before, refined stuff, excessive oily, fatty, fried stuff, processed meats, those kind of things. Those are all a little bit, without going into much detail, but pro-inflammatory stuff. Especially saturated fat through excessive intake of animal fat as such. So those are the things we want to avoid. And then the refined carbs, just because you're losing out on a lot of B vitamins and magnesium if we cut down on those. So try and avoid those as well, and make sure that the basis of your meals are really fruit and vegetable orientated.
Nicki, you touched on the timing and the importance of timing with the carbs and the proteins there, but from a holistic day perspective, with regards to fueling, and I think too many of us don't worry about it during training. We only worry about it on race day, like what are we having for breakfast? But your training is a good time to practice nutrition strategies like eating before a training run, and that sort of thing. Talk to me a little bit about the sort of day-to-day timing and how you should do things from a nutrition point of view.
All right. So depends on when you do your training. Okay, let's look at those people that run in the morning. So we want to get up and then we want to eat something before you go onto your run. It can be fruit. It can be a glass of fruit juice even, just to have something to just up blood sugar levels, because liver glycogen is quite low. You should look at intake during your runs. So any kind of carbohydrate fueling, and this is what you're going to use on the race. Recovery as soon as possible thereafter. And then after that is the three, I think, most important periods of eating if we look at timing of when we should eat. After that, we try to distribute food about 3 hourly apart. So you'll have a mid-morning snack, you'll have a lunch, late afternoon snack and a dinner, and then if you're still awake, which we prefer not to, but if you are, then a late afternoon snack. So eating with regular intervals, smaller amounts, that we never get to a point where we want to eat a whole chicken as a meal as such. Afternoon runners, basically the same. Breakfast within an hour after waking up. That's quite important. Every 3 hours. So you'll have a breakfast, mid-morning snack. You'll have a lunch, late afternoon snack. That late afternoon snack becomes your pre-race snack. So that late afternoon snack must be something that you're going to have probably before you run in the morning. So that's going to be a breakfasty thing. During running, after your training, again, start your recovery so long, and then you'll have your dinner, and then, if necessary, a late night snack thereafter. So really consistent, smaller meals right throughout the whole day.
All right, and then can you give us some tips with regards to sort of how to go about the pre-run fueling, what we should be doing? Are there any sort of rules of thumb or guidelines that we should be doing during? And then from a post perspective, is there anything that we should be doing post? So obviously we've spoken about the snacking and the meals either before or after, but what about those crucial periods just before, during, and after your run?
Okay, so just before, the two things that we really concentrate on before and during is hydration and fueling. Those are the two things, if you look at the nutrition field, that can cause tiredness. So the hydration is important, that when we start, we have to be fully hydrated, or as close as fully hydrated as we can be. It is a cruel sport that starts very early in the morning, so it doesn't give you a lot of time to work on this hydration, but to try whenever you open your eyes to immediately drink fluid and see if we can drink enough fluid to fill up a bladder, to have a bladder emptying before we go onto the road. So that is important. That would take about 1 cup to 2 cups of liquid, depends on what you went to bed with. And then the fueling part can be, as I've mentioned before, any kind of carbohydrate-based food or fruit or liquid as such. Then carrying on these principles during the run, still working on hydration, still working on carbohydrate intake. So the hydration is a little bit difficult, or not difficult, it's maybe also not even that complicated, but we try to drink according to thirst during your training runs. But then we must also consider training runs is often done without bottles. So this, according to thirst, is often determined at where the nearest BP garage is. So it's important that we do make sure that you drink with regular intervals, and that if you plan your run, plan it, where taps are or where there's a garage that you can drink enough liquid. On runs that's assisted, then obviously that becomes much, much easier in terms of liquid intake. But big advice there to have, again, regular intake of fluid, small amounts with regular intervals, rather than what we get so thirsty that we want to down 500 mils of water, because that's not comfortable to run with. Fueling wise, again, the consistency, as mentioned before, so every 20 minutes, maybe every 30 minutes, having a fuel type of thing. So it's going to be a bar, it's going to be a gel, it can be fruit, can be raisins. There's people that run with purity sachets. So whatever works for you. But again, looking at the practicality, you can't carry that much food with you whilst you're running. And also look at the variability. So it's very difficult to spend long hours on the road eating the same thing over and over and over again. So if you can have a variety in there, from a liquid, a solid, and a gel maybe, that you can vary it as you go along, usually works better. And then we work with consistency of about, I hate using numbers, but about 30 grams of carbs per hour. For the slower people, the faster people will use more. And a 30 gram would probably mean two 15 gram snacks. So they would that would be half hourly. And then as we go faster, it probably will cause you to eat every 20 minutes. Afterwards, those are still important. The carb refueling is important and the liquid is important, but then the other nutrient that obviously aids in recovery would be the protein intake. So the carb's still the dominant one. So again, you look at about 3 to 4 grams of carb to 1 gram of protein. So we're looking at, when you do your recovery meal and say it's a hearty breakfast, you rather do 3 toasts and 1 egg than what you do 3 eggs and 1 toast as such. You can do it through liquid. Fruit juice works well. You can then do it also through, I think most people have heard about the big advantage about milk and milky products for recovery. So that can be a Steri-Stumpy, a chocolate flavored milk, a Mars, yogurt, any of those kind of things, because that will contain then obviously the liquid as well as the carb as well as the protein into one drink. Keep on eating, so eat 2 hourly thereafter, and especially with the drinking, keep on drinking until again the bladder is full, you had a bladder emptying, and the urine is quite a light straw color, and then hydration has also been set for the recovery.
Yeah, Nicki, I'm going to put the slide up as well, just so that people can get a sort of fair idea of what you're talking about, particularly when it comes to what types of things. So, were you talking about X amount of grams of carbs or X amount of grams of protein? I think it's difficult for the average person to wrap their head around what does that actually mean. So the slide that's up on screen now, and you can get it in the slide deck if you want it, we'll send it through. Just let us know in the comments below. But that gives you a fair idea, and it's things like, I'm not going to run through all of it, you can see it as we're talking about, but like nuts and Nicki mentioned the milk and that sort of stuff. So definitely check that out. I think this will definitely help sort of solidify what all those numbers actually mean. And keep the questions coming in the comments. We're going to open the floor up now as well. Don't forget as well, if you want to get hold of Nicki, Nicki is in private practice as well. She does do some consultations. If you need some help personally, one-on-one, get in touch with Nicki. There's her details there as well. She's a registered dietitian. Her email address is nikki@nickideviliers.co.za. You can follow her on Twitter as well, @NickiDev. So definitely check it out. If you do need some help, we're going to answer as many questions as we can now as well. There are some great ones coming through. Nicki, while we've still got you in the hot seat, so to speak, we'll bring Lindsay back in just a second. We've had this question a few times, and Lindsay and I, we're not 100% sure how to answer it, so I'm hoping you can. There's been a lot of talk in Comrades this year with regards to when Ramadan was for our Muslim runners, and we've had a couple of those questions come in. One from Rusta saying some nutrition advice for Muslims coming out of the month of Ramadan with just a few days before Comrades, and then Anwar was saying some advice for Muslims who will be running Comrades a month after the fasting, so basically no foods or liquid from sunrise to sunset for the last month in the build-up.
Right, that is tricky, but I think the best would be to more schedule a run according to your eating. So if you've got a high quality run that needs to be done, rather schedule that for very early morning so you have your food intake and you can do the quality run thereafter. If it is just a recovery run, you can do it rather than towards the end of the evening and then have the recovery food thereafter. I think the biggest concern here is running hard without fuel availability. So just make sure that we run the hard runs after, the morning last meal rather than running it in the afternoon where you didn't have food for that run.
All right, cool. Another question in, this one from Dwayne Chris Williams, and it's got to do with the amount of carbs during race. He says, is it essential to take in 45 to 60 grams of carb per hour early on, even if he's not hungry, when he usually takes in between 30 and 45 per 2 hours in a marathon? Should you have like a rule of thumb, Nicki? Is it a case of these are the numbers and I'm going to stick by it regardless of how I feel and just keep topping up the tank, so to speak?
No. I think, Brad, there must be a little bit of sense and sensibility in this as well. So I think you can make yourself, what we know is it depends on the speed of which we run with. Okay, so the faster I go, the more carbs I'm going to need. So that is the one thing that would make a big difference in terms of 30 grams, 45 grams, 60 grams, and so forth. The other thing is if you didn't train with that amount of carbs, don't do it on the day, because you're just really going to feel uncomfortable even before halfway of that race. So I would say if you consistently eat as I said, according to schedule, but don't worry about the amount. So if I can get every 20 minutes something containing carb, if it's the drink, if it's a bar, if it's a gel or so forth. But don't try and force things down all the time, especially if you start feeling uncomfortable. Just leave it for a bit. But we do know that in the front part of the race, it's much, much easier to get stuff in because hydration is still fully there and the body is really emptying quite better than what we do at the end of the race. So I would mainly really be a bit more aggressive in the beginning of the race. Later on, you can rather skip the stuff. But we do know that if we train with carbs and you can push yourself to get more carbs in, you're probably going to have a better run if speed is your thing, if you want to run fast. We do know it's an ultra. So after a while, it's much more, becomes a mental race much more than a fuel race. And especially if I'm a slower runner, you don't have to push and push and push carbs all the time. Then just maybe go for a twice hourly feeding type of regime. But if we can start with maybe 3 feeds an hour and then slow it down towards 2 feeds an hour later on in the race.
Absolutely. Keep those questions coming. I know Lindsay's in the comments answering a few of those as well, so keep them coming. If there's anything you want to know from the panel tonight, all you need to do is pop them into the comments below. Nicki, another question, this one from Joe Falyun, saying, if one cuts carbs and then trains fasted for 3 weeks, and then 3 days before the race you carbo load, would there be any benefit? And if so, what is the fuel that's required on race day?
Alrighty, so the fasted runs, we do know that there's some adaptations. We're not that sure yet it increases performance. I think one thing is important that we do understand that if whatever run I do must be fueled. All right, so you can't just cut carbs or cut food and keep on running. So then you're going to try and make your body used to, fueling on fat, which is not a bad thing at all. My problem through the fasted races or the fasted training would be more that you put yourself at risk for injury through doing that, and you put yourself at risk for, suppressing the immune system. So we do, if you want to do faster runs, rather keep it to about 2 a week at most, and the rest must all be fueled with carbs. And the other thing is we are training the gut to accept the carbs. So if you're going to do faster runs and then 3 days prior do a huge carbohydrate loading, you will feel so uncomfortable that it's really not going to be to your benefit. So you're going to probably be, the discomfort of the huge amount of carbs is going to be really to the detriment of your race. If you want to do those, you can make yourself used to running on fat. So you can do a fat adaptation. We have to do it quite early on. Remember, fat runs are going to be slower runs that you train with. But then it's also important to still fuel some of your races or some of your trainings on carbs so that we keep on training the gut. The gut training or the gut adaptation takes about 2 to 3 weeks when we start introducing carbs after being on a very low carb diet for a while. So you're going to have to give yourself enough time to adapt to the carb intake. And if you're going to use carbs on the road, on the day, you need to train with them whilst, you need to use them whilst you're in training.
Nicki, 2 great questions with regards to being vegetarian and running Comrades. The one from Valerie Ho Dunn. Valerie says, what's your view on a vegetarian diet? I've been vegetarian for over 2 years. It's taken a while for my body to adjust and usually feel a fade closer to the end of the race, but that's expected with most runners. Just want to know protein sources and stuff to take on long runs. Usually start with oats and cinnamon as breakfast and some protein bars. And then also I had a question in from Anesh asking about carb loading for vegetarians who eat eggs but no fish or chicken. How many days before should you start carb loading, if you should be? And also, about smoothies? Do they play a role? And should I drink a concentrated energy drink the day before or on race day?
Right, that's a mouthful. So vegetarian diet, I think it can be a totally balanced diet. I've got no problem with that. I just do suggest that people really look at the nutrients that they're taking in. So vegetarian diet is really not just taking out meat. It is what should I include. Protein is one of the things that we often obviously then worry about. There's more than enough protein sources otherwise. So especially if you include legumes, it is important to include them regularly. Nuts, seeds, nut butters is good. Depending on what type of vegetarian you are, the inclusion of eggs and milk and those kind of things. So I think there's more than enough protein, and try not to, become a vegetarian and then fall for these very processed things all the time that we take in as protein. So the general rule for protein intake still stays the same. So small amounts with regular intervals right throughout the day. So we can't just have a single meal with a protein source and the rest of the day nothing. In terms of carb loading and vegetarianism, is exactly the same as all the others. So we start 2 to 3 days prior to. If you cannot manage to increase your food intake, we can do a carb loading with a fluid. It seems to work much better for most people, that if I drink 2 or 3 liters of a juice throughout those days, or 2 or 3 liters of an Energade or something like that, then we know there's extra carbs coming in. And that should be enough without eating huge plates of pasta and rice and extra wraps and those kind of things. If you're a hungry person, you can do it with food, but it's just basically going to mean you're going to eat extra carbs with every meal that you take. Remember, you are also tapering. So a lot of the carbs that you've been using on the run is also being stored as a glycogen. So don't go wild with it. But it is a way of which we can enhance performance, definitely, if we have a full glycogen tank. Also, just keeping in mind, Comrades would need a lot of glycogen tanks. So it will help you maybe up to a 30, 40K mark, but then you're going to, in any case, run out of fuel. So you still have to eat in the front part of the race. The very concentrated energy drinks or very concentrated sugary drinks, that helps with the carb loading. But it can cause also quite a bit of discomfort in that period of taking it. So I would rather prefer that you dilute something over the period of the whole day, that we also take care of the hydration part, which is necessary to store carbohydrates, that it's not just the concentrated sugar where the body is going to struggle.
Nicki, a question in from Mauro Black. Mauro's asking about solid food versus gels. What's recommended and what sort of intervals on race day?
Okay, so solid versus gel, the recommendation is whatever suits you and what you can get in. There's numerous studies that's been done to try and get to which one empties will empty the stomach faster and so forth. And they're pretty much equal. So it must be something that you prefer and that you like. Just keep in mind that chewing is not always that easy if you are tired or short of breath, but then rather eat the solid stuff on the flat parts of the race. The intervals with this, as I said before, most of these kind of snacks or bars usually contains between 15 and 20 grams. And sorry to come to the grams again, but that would prove, illustrate what I'm saying. If we then have to get to a 30-gram intake, it would mean a gel and something within an hour. So you would probably feed 30-minute, a carb feeds every 30 minutes with probably water feeds in between. If you're one of the faster runners, the probably is going to need a little bit more. You would probably feed with 20-minute intervals. The best would probably be to get yourself to feed according to tables. So either maybe you have one water table, one where we feed water, one where we feed carb and another carb and then a water again, or otherwise a liquid carb on the one table, skip one table, a solid carb with water on the other table. But try really to feed not less than twice in an hour in terms of some other carb feed, especially in the front part of the race.
All right, Nicki, another question in from Michael Schaefer. Michael saying, can nutrition be used in the aid and prevention of cramps, the effect of cramps in the later part of the race? What can be used other than sort of those salt tabs and electrolyte drinks to replenish the salts and electrolytes, or are the tabs and drinks better?
All right, so there's no definite connection between nutrition and cramping. So some people will cramp because of nutrition, but most of the cramping is not really that related. So I don't want too many supplements and pills and potions going on to try and prevent cramping, because that can actually make, increase the gastric discomfort at people. So now we're not cramping, but we're nauseous as hell. So that's not going to help much either. So in nutrition, the blocks to tick, the first block would be hydration, to see that your hydration is done well. Do have electrolytes, but a lot of the solid food that you eat does have electrolytes in it. I wouldn't necessarily go for salt tablets as such, but something like an electrolyte replacement drink would be good. Just keeping in mind that all the sports drinks that we have does have electrolytes in it. So don't be overzealous and putting extra tabs and extra fizzies and stuff in water all the time right throughout the whole race. Temperature on the day is going to make a difference. So if it is very hot and there's a very high sweat rate, I would make use maybe of electrolytes and diluted drinks, that there's not that much carbs, but more liquid with an electrolyte mix. That makes sense. But it can be normal salt. It can definitely be a normal salt sachet that you just eat a pinch of normal salt, or that you just add a pinch of salt to the water that you're drinking. It doesn't have to be, all these tabs or supplements or fizzies that people put in water.
Nicki, lots of questions coming in about nausea and gut distress, sort of like runners' trots, dealing with upset tummy on race day. They're two different things, but obviously are related. How can you deal with nausea and GI distress on race day? What are some of the causes, and what are some things you can do to maybe alleviate it or prevent it?
Okay, that actually runs quite nicely with what we've just said. You need to train now with all the stuff that you're going to use, and also in the volumes that you're going to use it, and also at the pace that you're going to run. All these things is an influence. So a lot of the nausea is often that we're overzealous with feeding. We just feed too much. That can be quite a big one. The other one is that we run in dehydration. Remember, as we run, the further we go, the less the stomach is going to clear food from the stomach as such. So you basically run with a full stomach. That happens later on, but that also would ask of you to take care of hydration to make sure that we don't run into a dehydration. Also, when you get nauseous, the best would be to stop food intake as such. Maybe start walking so that we can get maybe some fluid or blood back to the stomach, that there's not that intense up and down jarring of the stomach. To try and get that to alleviate. And some people will find relief with a gassy thing, but not necessarily a sweet thing. So if there is something like carbonated water, something like that, that also sometimes alleviates some of the nauseous feelings. Some of the people that I work with get relief from drinking a ginger in a substance. Ginger has got a renowned function of decreasing nausea, so something like a ginger beer rather, or drinking a ginger-based thing. But the main thing there is decrease the intensity, stop the solid food intake, and try to walk through water points so that we can get the stomach more in a stable position, and then walk, not eating too much and then see if we can get rid of the nausea like that. The main thing for me would be much more the preventative side. So don't eat carbs if you didn't train with those volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicki, we are running out of time at a rapid race, so I'm going to say thank you very much to you. I'm going to get Lindsay back into the hot seat for parting shots, but I think you make a very important point there too about not eating and drinking too much, and I think that's one of the dangers that you can pick up at Comrades is with the amount of refreshment tables, particularly later on in the second half of the race where they're so long and they're so close together that you can almost see the next one from the last one. So just because it's there, again, it's one of those things. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to eat and drink everything at that table. So that is for sure. Nicki, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. And don't forget, if you want to check out some of the Comrades Marathon resources as well, then be sure to head over to comrades.com. There's training programs there that you can get. Also, our weekly audio podcast that's run with Coach Parry. That's where you can find it on all sort of decent podcast players. You can get it in Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher and the works. And then we also have a weekly Q&A video that you can pick up on coachparry.com/YouTube. That's where our latest videos go every week. We answer some great questions on there too. And then with just on a couple of months to go to race day, be sure to check out the Comrades Marathon Roadmap. It'll basically walk you through day by day exactly what you need to be doing training wise. You also get access to all the training programs. You get access to our coaches. It's the only place online where you can get access to Lindsay on a daily basis to get some help as well. Motivation and accountability. There's a group of runners exactly like you. If you'd like to find out more about it, head over to coachparry.com/roadmap. And then the next online training seminar brought to you by Bonitas is coming to you on the 29th of April. Put it into your diaries now at 8 p.m. GMT +2. You can register at coachparry.com/webinar. Lindsay, it's been going crazy in the comments. Keep the questions coming. Been another great one. And then just final parting shots from you. Obviously, there was a lot of info to get through to today, but I think there was tons to take out of it.
Yeah, and look, from today we're 11 weeks out, and that's why we felt it's really important that people can get an opportunity to start practicing their nutrition, because we always harp on about nothing new on race day, and then the novice seminars happen 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks before Comrades, and then all of a sudden people have been doing it wrong perhaps, and then they panic. So I think a lot of great information today. And over the next 11 weeks, plenty of opportunity to dial in what works for you and arrive nervous, excited, and confident for race day.
Absolutely. So from the three of us, from myself, Brad Brown, Nicki de Villiers, and Lindsay, thank you for joining us. Keep the questions coming. There have been some great ones. And once again, if you'd like the slide deck from this presentation, just let us know in the comments below. And please, if you wouldn't mind sharing this with your running mates as well, it really helps us spread the message. And a massive thank you to Comrades and Bonitas for making these seminars possible.